Jesse Holland is next. He covers race and ethnicity for the Associated Press in Washington, D.C. He just has a book out, or I guess it's been a year now, he was telling me last night. The Invisibles, the Untold Story of African American Slaves in the White House. I watched your interview with Brian Lamb. I'm going to buy that book. It sounded like a fascinating story. In 2004, Jesse became the first African American ever elected to the Congressional Standing Committee of Correspondence. He currently is one of the AP's Supreme Court correspondents, the first African American to be a Supreme Court correspondent for a major media organization, and he's also been doing some teaching, visiting Distinguished Professor of Ethics and Journalism at the Walter J. Lemke Department of Journalism at the University of Arkansas.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm not going to take my full 10 minutes because I'm more interested in hearing from you than you are from hearing from me stand here and talk to you. But there are a couple of thoughts I want to share before we go any further. I'm not going to talk as much about what I do as race and ethnicity reporter for AP as much as I'm going to talk about why I do it. For me, race and ethnicity reporting is about writing the stories I want to read. Telling the stories that I want people to know about. I've been with AP for about 23 years now. Worked in Columbia, South Carolina, covered the state legislature up here in Albany, and I've been in DC since 2000. And I've served in many different positions for AP. But I keep coming back to race and ethnicity stories no matter where I am, because those are the stories I want to read, especially now. I write about the controversy over missing black and brown children in Washington, D.C., because I have 2 children of my own, and I want to know what's going on in D.C. I write stories about the military's decisions on how black women can wear their hair, because I have a wife who's in the military and who is black. That's what, for me, race and ethnicity stories are about. It's about each of us taking the time as writers, as journalists, and going out and finding the stories we think need to be told and telling them. Now, and this, by the way, is not just directed to the black students in here, to the Hispanic students in here, to the Asian students in here. This is directed also to the white students in here. Because race and ethnicity no longer means minority. In the past, race and ethnicity stories meant we write about everyone but white Americans. But there's a demographic shift coming up in America. In about 20 years, we're going to be a majority minority country. And we're going to have to start writing about white America as a race. So this is something all of us in journalism need to think about. And that's something we can see the industry moving toward now. We can see stories about the life expectancy of white men in America. That's a race and ethnicity story. We can see stories about the heroin epidemic in America among whites. That's a race and ethnicity story. In the past, we didn't call them that. We just called those stories about Americans. But now, we're coming to realize that these are race and ethnicity stories. These are stories about communities, about people that need to be told. But there's one thing we have to remember as race and ethnicity reporters, no matter what field in journalism we're in, you are not going to be popular. This is not a field you want to get into if you want people to like you, because I can tell you they will not. I wrote a story yesterday, a profile of Maxine Waters, that I actually had been working on for a while, and I rewrote 4 times because she keeps saying and doing things. I couldn't settle on one lead because Maxine Waters, Congressman Waters, always moves the story forward. We'll say that. We'll call it that. She moves the story forward. And I was really interested in 2 emails I got on that story yesterday. The first email said, "Good story, not. Maxine Waters is a nut job, and I don't understand why you would take your time to interview someone like that. There are so many other members of Congress who are more interesting, and you took time to write about Maxine Waters." The second story said, a second email said, "I love the story about Maxine Waters. You should write more stories about Maxine Waters. Why aren't you interviewing the other members of the Congressional Black Caucus?" Being a race and ethnicity reporter means that you're going to run into people who say, you should do more, and people who say, you should do less. But what it's about is finding the stories that you think need to be told and getting your organization to put those stories up front. That's pretty much all I do. I do that not only in my journalism career, I also do that in my literary career. My first 2 nonfiction books, Black Men Built the Capitol, Discovering African American History in and around Washington, D.C., and The Invisibles, the untold story of African American slaves in the White House, both exist because I went looking for a book to tell me these stories and I couldn't find one. So I took it upon myself that if I wanted to read these stories, there had to be somebody else that wanted to read them too. So if no one else was going to write it, I was going to write it myself. And that's what we do in race and ethnicity. If nobody else wants to tell our stories, we tell our stories ourselves. That's what we do. That's what we should be doing. But by the way, by doing this, you forfeit a phrase that Americans love to use when they talk about the media. You forfeit the phrase, "Why isn't the media covering this?" Because that then becomes your job. That then becomes what you're supposed to do. I can't read a newspaper or watch a television show or go to a website and say, "Why isn't the media covering the missing black children in Washington, D.C.? Why isn't the media covering the funding for HBCUs in Donald Trump's budget?" I can't say that because that's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's what your job is going to be, no matter what part of media you're going to be in. It is your job to say to yourself, "Why isn't the media covering this?" and then go cover it yourselves. That is the job of journalism. That's what we do. And it's not just a race and ethnicity job, that's a journalism job. To find the stories that aren't being told and take it upon yourselves to tell them. That's one of the frustrating parts of what we do. There are so many of these stories out there that need to be told. Fascinating stories, great stories. And there aren't enough people telling them. That's what I do, and that's what you're going to do when you get out in there into the field of journalism. I can't wait to see some of the stories you guys are going to turn out. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great message. I wish I'd thought of that. A really, really a great message.